He disowned me my whole life, then left me everything in his will. Why? I've spent my entire life trying to earn a seat at a table I was never invited to. Some people grow up in warm houses where love is baked into Sunday pancakes and tucked into bedtime stories. My house was polished oak and cold marble, picture perfect from the outside, like one of those glossy southern living spreads. But inside, everything was sharp edges and silence. My name is Haley Bennett, and I was born into a legacy I never really belonged to. Growing up in Houston, Texas, the Bennett name meant something. My father, Gregory Bennett, was the kind of man people stood up straighter for when he walked into a room. He ran one of the largest commercial real estate firms in the state. He didn't just build buildings, he built reputations, crushed competitors, and expected his children to be reflections of his power. Ethan, my older brother, was everything he wanted in a son, bold, smooth-talking, a carbon copy of him right down to the smug half-smile. My sister, Chloe, was the family's peacekeeper, sweet, diplomatic, the one who knew how to read every room and disarm any tension with a single sentence. And then there was me. I wasn't rebellious. I wasn't loud. I just didn't fit. While Ethan went into the family business, I moved to Chicago and carved out my own path in finance. By 32, I had made managing director at one of the top firms in the city. I had my own apartment overlooking the lake, a team that respected me, and clients who trusted me with more money than most people will ever see. And yet, every Christmas, every family gathering, I felt like the intern who accidentally wandered into the executive suite. The worst part? I kept showing up. Hoping, praying, begging, silently, that maybe this time, my father would look at me the way he looked at Ethan. That maybe he'd say, "I'm proud of you, Haley." But he never did. I remember one Thanksgiving a few years ago. I brought a bottle of Chateau Margaux, a vintage I'd hunted down for weeks because I knew he admired that vineyard. He didn't even open it. Just passed it to the butler and said, "Put it with the others." I laughed it off, pretending it didn't sting. That's the thing about growing up invisible, you learn how to shrink into smiles that don't quite reach your eyes. The older I got, the more I convinced myself that maybe success would fix it. That maybe, if I achieved enough, earned enough, gave enough, I could finally buy my way into his approval. Ridiculous, I know. But you'd be amazed at the lies we cling to when the truth hurts too much. 2 weeks before the Bennett family reunion, an annual event where appearances mattered more than affection, I got this idea. My father had always loved cars. Not just any cars, but sleek, statement-making luxury. So I decided to surprise him with a brand new Mercedes S-Class. Midnight blue, custom interior, top-of-the-line everything. It was stupid expensive, the kind of purchase that made even me hesitate, but I didn't care. This was going to be it. The gesture. The moment. I imagined the scene in my head 100 times, the keys in his hand, the glint of pride in his eyes, maybe even a hug. God, I was starved enough to hope for a hug. I flew into Houston 2 days early and drove straight to the dealership to pick it up. The sales guy handed me the keys like I'd just won something. It felt symbolic. Like maybe I was finally unlocking something I'd been locked out of my whole life. I drove the car straight to our family home, a sprawling estate in River Oaks with stone lions guarding the gate and hedges trimmed so perfectly they looked fake. The house hadn't changed. Neither had the feeling in my chest the moment I stepped out of the car. Gregory was in his study, of course. I found him sipping scotch, poring over blueprints like he hadn't retired 5 years ago. I cleared my throat, heart thudding like a kid about to confess to breaking a window. "I have something for you," I said, tossing him the keys. He caught them, glanced down, then up at me. No smile. No surprise. A car? A Mercedes S-Class. Midnight blue. I remembered it was your favorite. He nodded slowly, turned the key in his palm like it was a pen he wasn't sure he liked. "It's generous," he said finally. "But you don't need to do all this." I wanted to. He set the keys down on the desk. Didn't even ask to see it. Then, just as I turned to leave, he added, "You can't buy what doesn't belong to you." I stopped cold. "I'm not trying to buy anything." He chuckled. "You always have been. But don't worry, I won't hold it against you." "You're trying. You're trying." The words felt like a slap wrapped in velvet. I didn't reply. Just left the study, heart racing, hands shaking. That night, as I tried to fall asleep in my childhood bedroom, unchanged, untouched, like a museum of someone who never really lived there, I overheard him on the phone. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but the door was cracked, and his voice carried down the hallway. "Yeah, Haley's here. She brought a car this time." "I know, right?" Still desperate for approval. Poor kid. Doesn't even know. The rest faded. Or maybe my brain refused to hear it. I sat in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering what he meant. What didn't I know? By morning, curiosity had morphed into suspicion. I couldn't stop thinking about the things that never quite added up, the way he treated me like a guest in our home, the way family photos always featured Ethan and Chloe front and center, with me tucked in the corner like an afterthought. And suddenly, a memory hit me like a freight train. Years ago, during a routine medical check, a nurse had mentioned something odd about my blood type. I brushed it off at the time. But now? I googled discrete DNA testing in Houston. I chose a reputable lab. Drove across town like a woman possessed. Dropped off a sealed envelope with a sample I'd collected from my father's toothbrush. No questions asked. They told me results would take about 10 days. Right in time for the reunion. Back at the house, I smiled through dinner. Listened to Ethan talk about some new skyscraper he was financing. Let Chloe lean her head on my shoulder and say, "I'm glad you came home." I even poured my father another glass of wine, like nothing had changed. Like my world hadn't tilted on its axis. But inside, something had cracked open. And there was no closing it again. We spend our lives trying to fit into places we think we're supposed to belong. But sometimes, the very foundation we stand on isn't even ours to begin with. If this part moved you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Tell me, have you ever questioned where you truly belong? They say the truth sets you free. What they don't tell you is that, first, it shatters everything you thought was real. I didn't open the DNA envelope right away. I carried it around like a ticking bomb, buried under a pack of gum in my purse. But it was always there, pulsing. I'd catch myself touching it absent-mindedly in meetings, at red lights, while brushing my teeth. As if my body knew what my heart didn't want to hear. It was the third night back home in Houston, and I couldn't sleep. Again. I padded downstairs in my socks and robe like a teenager sneaking snacks, except what I was hungry for was clarity. The kitchen was dark, the kind of rich silence that only exists in homes with double insulation and a cleaning crew. I sat at the marble island, the envelope in front of me. For a second, I considered tossing it. Pretending I'd never tested. But then I thought of all the times Gregory looked through me. All the praise he reserved for Ethan. All the restraint I'd taught myself not to cry in front of him. So I opened it. Paternal match, negative. My breath caught. I reread it 3 times. Then again. But the words didn't change. Gregory Bennett was not my father. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, staring at the polished marble, suddenly unsure what day it was or who I even was. 32 years of my life, gone in a sentence. In the background, the refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside, a sprinkler clicked on. But inside me, a silence so loud it hurt. Eventually, I went upstairs, slipped the envelope under my mattress like it was something dirty, and laid awake staring at the ceiling fan. At some point, the tears came. Quiet, warm, ashamed. The next morning, the house was alive with pre-reunion chaos. Silver trays. Staff uniforms. My mother directing floral arrangements like a general with a battle plan. I watched her for a while. Then, during a rare moment alone in the sunroom, I confronted her. "Mom," I said, voice tight. "Am I Gregory's biological daughter?" She froze. The tray in her hands tilted, a crystal glass clinking softly. "What kind of question is that?" I slid the envelope across the table. Her face changed, just slightly. But enough. "I had a test done." She sat down, slowly. No hysteria. No denial. "I was young," she said, eyes distant. "It was summer. I was in love. His name was Michael Harding." "Does Dad know?" She winced. "He knew. From the beginning. But we never talked about it. He proposed when he thought I was pregnant with his child. I didn't correct him." My throat tightened. "So you lied to both of us?" "I was trying to survive, Haley." "By burying me alive?" She flinched, but I didn't take it back. "I always wondered why he hated me," I continued. "Now I know. He didn't hate me. He just couldn't stand the reminder." She reached for me, but I stepped back. "You chose him. You kept choosing him." I was scared. "You let him shape me into someone I'm still trying to unlearn." Her eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry." I didn't answer. I couldn't. I left. I drove aimlessly. Through old neighborhoods, past the park I used to swing at, the high school where I was valedictorian but still heard Ethan's name chanted louder at football games. I ended up in front of an old diner. My hand shook as I parked. Inside, I ordered coffee I didn't drink. At the table next to me, a father helped his daughter with a coloring menu. She was maybe 6, a tornado of curls and giggles. He kissed her forehead like it was the most natural thing in the world. I had to leave. By the time I returned home, it was dusk. The backyard had been transformed, twinkling lights, champagne fountains, servers in tuxedos. It was like a wedding without the love. I went straight to my room. As I passed Gregory's study, I heard his voice. "She's acting strange. I wouldn't be surprised if she knows." Pause. "She was never mine anyway." "That's Laura's mess." A beat. A chuckle. "Honestly? I don't even feel bad. That girl doesn't have what it takes." "She never did. Not like Ethan." I froze. My chest tightened. "Let her leave if she wants to. Hell, maybe she'll spare us the scene." That did it. I pushed the door open. He didn't flinch. Just looked up from his drink, perfectly calm. "You shouldn't listen at doors, Haley." I didn't plan to. "But you make it easy when you talk like the villain in a soap opera." He sipped his scotch. "Why did you keep me?" I asked. "Why raise a girl you knew wasn't yours?" "Because it looked better than the alternative," he said, unblinking. "Because your mother begged. And because image matters." I laughed. "That's it? A PR move?" He tilted his head. "You think I owed you more than that?" "No," I said quietly. "Not anymore." He leaned back, completely unfazed. Then we understand each other. And I realized something chilling. He wasn't cruel because of what I was. He was cruel because it never occurred to him to be anything else. I left the room and went to find Chloe. She was outside near the pool, helping the staff set up lanterns. "I need to ask you something," I said. She looked up. "Okay. Did you know?" Her eyes softened. "Not everything. But, yeah. I suspected." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I thought maybe you already knew. Deep down. And maybe, like me, you were waiting for someone to say it out loud." I sat beside her. "I hate him." "No," she said gently. "You hurt. That's different." We sat there a while. Silent. The kind of silence that doesn't need to be filled. Then she said, Are you going to tell them? At the party? I nodded. He wants a show? I'll give him one. Sometimes, we're born into stories we didn't write. But we still get to choose the ending. If you've ever faced a truth that cracked your world open, I'd love to hear how you rebuilt. Let's talk. The Bennett family reunion had always been theatrical. This year, it felt like a finale. From the moment I walked down the grand staircase in my navy silk dress, heels tapping like a metronome on marble, I could feel the weight of the performance ahead. The dress hugged my ribs too tight, or maybe it was my breath that couldn't settle. In the backyard, everything glowed. Fairy lights curled around white canopies. A string quartet played something elegant and forgettable. People sipped champagne and laughed like they hadn't rehearsed those lines all their lives. The smell of money hung heavier than the perfume. I spotted Gregory holding court near the bar, surrounded by men in watches that cost more than my college tuition. Ethan stood beside him, mid-story, gesturing wide with the same fake confidence that had won him most likely to lead in high school. Chloe was near the catering table, making polite conversation with someone who once called me the intense sister. A server floated past with a tray. I grabbed a flute of champagne, mostly to keep my hand from trembling. When dinner was called, we were seated beneath a chandelier suspended from the canopy ceiling. I was placed, of course, at the far end of the long banquet table, next to a second cousin I hadn't spoken to since the Clinton administration. Gregory stood. Silver hair slicked back, his Scotch glass catching the light. Silence swept the crowd. Even the cicadas outside seemed to lean in. I want to thank you all for being here tonight, he said, voice polished and smooth. This family is my greatest accomplishment. Ethan, your leadership has made me proud every day. Chloe, your heart and grace continue to amaze me. Pause. Smiles. Toasts. No mention of me. Not a glance. My chest went hot. And then cold. I stood. The sound of my chair scraping stone cut through the chatter. Every head turned. Gregory didn't blink. He just tightened his jaw like he already knew where this was going. I didn't plan on saying anything, I began, voice steady. But since we're celebrating legacies tonight, I figured I'd contribute. A few nervous chuckles. My mother's face went pale. I brought a gift, I said, reaching into my clutch. Something personal. Something clarifying. I pulled out the envelope. The DNA test. Gregory's mouth flattened. Chloe stiffened. This, I said, holding it high, contains proof that Gregory Bennett is not my biological father. Gasps. Audible. Someone dropped a wine glass. It shattered, sharp and final. Gregory didn't move. I've spent my life trying to earn a seat at this table. Working harder, achieving more, staying quieter, because I thought I just needed to prove myself worthy. I looked at him. But it was never about that. Was it? Gregory stepped forward, calm as ever. We can discuss this privately, he said through clenched teeth. No, I said, louder now. See, the damage was never done in private. It was done right here. In front of all these people. With every toast I was left out of. With every not now, Haley. Every single time you pretended I didn't exist. Whispers buzzed like bees. One uncle stood up like he wasn't sure whether to run or applaud. You knew I wasn't yours, I said. You knew from the start. And instead of love, you chose resentment. Instead of raising me, you erased me. Gregory opened his mouth, but I kept going. And I let it happen. For years, I told myself that if I just tried harder, you'd see me. But now I realize, you saw me all along. And you made a decision. I turned to the guests. Don't let the suits and champagne fool you. This legacy? It's built on omission. On silence. On deciding which truths are convenient. I looked at Ethan. You once told me, don't take it personally, it's just how Dad is. But I do take it personally. Because I am a person. He couldn't meet my eyes. I looked at my mom. You let it happen. You let him shrink me year after year. And the worst part? You called it love. Tears welled in her eyes. She didn't deny it. Then, finally, I turned back to Gregory. You wanted a show. Here it is. And I dropped the envelope on his dinner plate. The room froze. Then, Gregory laughed. Not loud. But sharp. Cruel. Congratulations, he said, raising his scotch. You've made yourself the center of attention. I hope it was worth it. And that's when something truly unexpected happened. Chloe stood up. Actually, she said, voice trembling, Haley deserves better. She always has. Gregory's face cracked. For the first time, he looked genuinely stunned. Sit down, Chloe, he barked. No, she said, stronger now. You don't get to silence people anymore. Gasps again. But this time they felt like applause. I nodded at her. Just once. Then turned and walked away. I didn't rush. I didn't look back. I passed servers holding trays like shields, guests with mouths open, phones half raised. I walked through the garden where I used to pretend to be a princess. Tonight, I'd become something far more dangerous. Visible. When I reached the circular drive, the Mercedes S-Class gleamed under the entry lights. I got in. Hands steady. Heart racing. As I pulled away, I didn't cry. I laughed. Not because it was funny. But because I felt clean. Like I'd finally stepped out of someone else's costume. Later, at a boutique hotel downtown, I checked in under my mother's maiden name. Ordered fries and whiskey. Sat on the balcony in a robe, watching the Houston skyline blink like it had something to confess. Around midnight, my phone lit up. A message from an unknown number. Hi Haley. My name is Michael Harding. Chloe reached out. I live in Austin. If you're open to it, I'd love to meet. Whenever you're ready. No pressure. Just hope. I stared at the text for a long time. And for the first time in a long time, I felt chosen. Truth is rarely pretty. But sometimes, it's the only thing that can set a soul straight. Have you ever been pushed to the edge, only to find your power right there waiting for you? Tell me how you stepped into it. I'm listening. People talk about closure like it's a final scene, credits roll, curtain falls, cue soft piano music. But sometimes, closure isn't an end at all. Sometimes, it's just an unfamiliar beginning. The morning after the reunion, I sat at the edge of my hotel bed, staring at my phone. Still stunned. Still sorting through the ruins of what I thought I knew. Gregory's voice echoed in my head, cold and smug, like the last nail in a box he'd been building around me since I was a child. But louder than that, was the quiet message that came after midnight. Hi Haley. My name is Michael Harding. Chloe reached out. I'm in Austin. If you ever want to talk, I'd like that very much. My fingers hovered over the screen for an hour. Michael Harding. The man whose DNA I carried. Whose face might hold the blueprint of my own. My mother had said so little about him, as if the fewer words she gave him, the easier it would be to forget he existed. But he had existed. And he was here, now, texting me like a stranger with a story I'd never been told. By noon, Chloe texted too. Just checking in. You were amazing last night. I'm proud of you. Then. He stormed out, by the way. Said you embarrassed him. Said he's cutting everyone off. Honestly. I hope he means it. I didn't write back immediately. But I smiled. Chloe, my sister, my only real family left in that house, had chosen truth over politeness. Later that afternoon, I sent a message to Michael. Hi Michael. Thank you for reaching out. I'm still processing everything, but, Would you like to meet for coffee tomorrow? Somewhere quiet. The reply came within minutes. Absolutely. There's a small cafe near the bayou, Jackson and Elm. Noon? I'll get a seat by the window. No pressure, truly. That night, I barely slept. My mind was crowded with versions of what tomorrow might look like: awkward, emotional, maybe both. I tried not to expect too much, but the child inside me still whispered questions I hadn't dared ask in years. What if he sees me and regrets it? What if I look like him? What if I finally feel like I belong? I arrived 15 minutes early. Jackson and Elm was tucked between a florist and a used bookstore. The kind of cafe where the baristas wear bandanas and call you friend. The air smelled like roasted beans and cinnamon, and the windows let in warm October light. I found the window seat. My palms were damp. At 11:58, a man walked in. Salt and pepper hair. Brown leather jacket. A cautious smile that looked like it had been waiting 30 years. He saw me. Paused. Then stepped forward. Haley, he asked, gently. Yes. His handshake was firm, warm. And in the few seconds we locked eyes, I saw it, my left dimple. His brow bone. My mouth. I had never seen my face in another human being before. We sat. There was a moment of breathless silence, neither of us wanting to say the wrong thing. Can I get you anything? He asked, already half standing. I've got it, I said. Black, right? He blinked, then smiled. Yeah. How'd you know? I shrugged. Lucky guess. While I waited at the counter, I watched him fiddle with the sugar packets. He looked nervous, but not in a way that made me anxious. It made him human. When I returned, he took the cup like it meant more than it should. I didn't think I'd ever meet you, he said softly. Honestly, I didn't know I had a daughter. Not until Chloe reached out. I believe you, I said. He nodded. Back then, Laura and I were kids. We weren't ready. I was going to grad school in Oregon. She was being pushed toward Gregory. I never heard from her again. I didn't even know she'd been pregnant. I stayed quiet. I would have been there, he added quickly. I know that doesn't change anything, but I would have shown up. I looked down at my coffee. Someone should have. He nodded. I'm sorry. We talked for almost an hour. It wasn't dramatic. No tears. No big reveal. Just real. He told me about his work, environmental engineering, flood mitigation, river restorations. He'd never married. Workaholic, he said with a sheepish laugh. And then? I guess life just happened. I told him about Chicago. Finance. Long hours. Lake views. I didn't talk about Gregory, and he didn't ask. At one point, he reached into his coat and pulled out a photo, creased, faded. This was me and Laura. Summer of '91. She was wild. Brave. So smart. I stared at the photo. My mother looked impossibly young. And happy. Her eyes bright, not yet tired by years of secrets. For the first time, I saw her not as my mother, but as a girl, scared, in love, maybe desperate to choose what felt safe. We didn't hug when we parted. We didn't make promises. But as I walked out, he called after me, Haley? I turned. I know it's late. But if you ever want to talk again, or just sit in silence, I'm here. I nodded. Thank you. That evening, I walked alone through the park near the hotel. Leaves rustled underfoot. Dogs barked. Children screamed with joy in the distance. And for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe all the way to the bottom of my lungs. I called Chloe. How was it? She asked, voice hushed like she knew this was sacred ground. Quiet, I said. But kind. Are you okay? I think I'm starting to be. She paused. I'm so proud of you. I laughed. You keep saying that. Because you keep earning it. Back in my room, I stood at the mirror. For years, I had searched for Gregory's approval in every reflection. Now, I saw something else. I saw a woman who had faced the truth, and didn't flinch. I opened the hotel notepad and scribbled a note before checking out. Dear me. You were never a mistake. You were simply written into the wrong book. Now, you get to write your own. I folded it and tucked it into my wallet, behind my ID. A reminder. Sometimes, healing doesn't roar. It sits beside you with a cup of coffee, and says, I'm here when you're ready. Have you ever met a version of yourself you never thought you'd find? I'd love to hear what it meant to you. Let's talk. I didn't expect to be called back to the house. Not after the reunion. Not after what I'd said, what I'd done. But 2 weeks later, I got an email from Gregory's lawyer. Short. Blunt. Formal. Mr. Bennett has updated his estate documents and has requested your presence. At first, I laughed. Out loud. The kind of laugh that comes not from humor, but from disbelief, like the universe had the audacity to twist the knife one more time. I almost deleted the email. Almost blocked the firm. But curiosity has teeth, and mine were already sinking into the possibility, what could this man possibly want from me now? So, I went. The drive back to the estate felt longer than usual. The trees lining the property hadn't changed, but I had. The last time I left, it was with fire in my lungs and grief cracking in my chest. This time, I arrived armored. Gregory didn't greet me at the door. A staff member I didn't recognize led me to the study, his infamous domain. It still smelled like leather and arrogance. The walls, lined with heavy books he likely never read. His scotch still on the cart. Untouched. He was there. Not standing behind the desk, not seated in the armchair, no. He was on video. A pre-recorded message. Hello, Haley, he said, staring dead into the camera. If you're seeing this, it means I'm gone. I didn't move. Don't flatter yourself. This isn't a confession. Or an apology. I'm too old to start pretending I feel guilt. Of course. But I am a man who understands leverage. Legacy. And consequence. He leaned back in the leather chair on screen, laced his fingers. I'm leaving you something. Not because I care. But because truth, when revealed late enough, becomes power. And power, well, you finally earned that, didn't you? There was a pause. I could hear my own breath. I watched you walk out of that party like you were setting fire to everything. And I thought, maybe she is mine, after all. That one stung. The screen went black. His lawyer handed me a thick envelope and left the room. Alone, I opened it. Inside were 3 things. 1. A letter. Handwritten. From Gregory. 2. A deed to a small cabin property in Colorado. 3. A photo of me at age 10, standing in the rain, face sullen, arms crossed, and Gregory in the background, umbrella over his head but not over mine. I stared at the photo the longest. Then I read the letter. Haley. You want answers. You want the why. You weren't mine. And I hated that. Not because of you, but because of what it made me feel, powerless. I raised you out of duty. And you made it harder by being smart. By asking questions. By not being soft like Chloe. You were a mirror I didn't want to look into. That night at the reunion, when you said I kept you close enough to control, far enough to discard, you were right. But part of me admired it. You didn't flinch. You stood your ground. That was the moment I realized. I lost. The cabin was my escape. I went there whenever I needed to be someone else. It's yours now. Not because I loved you. Because you earned it. I folded the letter. Tight. Neat. Like I could turn his words into something smaller than they were. The cabin meant nothing to me. But his admission, his loss, felt like the final move in a long, brutal game I never asked to play. I didn't tell anyone I went back to the house. Not even Chloe. Instead, I drove west. 2 weeks later, I stood on a hilltop in Colorado, staring at a weather-beaten cabin surrounded by yellowing grass and towering trees. The air was thinner up there. Every breath a reminder, you're alive. I walked inside. It was dusty. Cold. Mostly empty. On the fireplace mantel, there was one thing left behind. A photo of all 3 kids, me, Ethan, and Chloe, at some long-forgotten Easter brunch. I had a jelly stain on my dress. My mouth was mid-laugh. Gregory's hand rested on Ethan's shoulder. Mine? Nowhere near him. I left the photo where it was. I stayed at the cabin for 3 days. Didn't call anyone. Didn't check email. Just existed. Hiked. Read. Sat by the fireplace with a blanket and thought about the idea of legacy, not the kind etched on buildings, but the kind that leaves marks on hearts. Gregory had left me something physical. Fine. But Michael had given me something intangible. A door. Since our meeting, we'd exchanged emails. Shared music. He sent me a photo of his dog sleeping with its tongue out and wrote, "He reminds me of myself, clumsy but well-meaning." We weren't father and daughter yet. But we were people. And that was enough. On my last night at the cabin, I sat outside and watched the stars. Something about them felt kinder than they had when I was a kid. Like maybe the universe wasn't mocking me anymore, it was making room. I pulled out my phone. Typed a note I hadn't had the courage to write before. Hi Michael. If you're free next weekend, I'd like to visit Austin. No pressure. Just, would be nice to see you again. He responded almost immediately. I'll stock up on coffee and awkward silences. And maybe a little hope. When I got back to Chicago, I moved apartments. Smaller place. But more sunlight. No skyline view, but I didn't care. I kept Gregory's letter in a shoebox under my bed. Not because I needed it. But because surviving something doesn't mean you forget it. You honor it. You learn from it. And then you live. Really live. The first night in the new apartment, I stood barefoot in the kitchen eating cereal straight from the box. Chloe called. You okay? She asked. Better, I said. Getting better. She was quiet for a beat. Then, he didn't deserve the ending you gave him. But you did. I didn't do it for him. I know, she said softly. That's why it mattered. Before we hung up, she added, I'm proud of you. I didn't roll my eyes this time. I just let it land. I don't look in mirrors the same way anymore. I don't see a girl trying to be enough. I see a woman who knows she always was. When people ask about my family, I still say, it's complicated. But now, I say it with a smile. Some stories don't end with a bow. Some end with an open window and the courage to climb through it. Some leave you standing in a quiet room, holding a letter, finally understanding the difference between being chosen and being claimed. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever carried someone else's silence for too long? What did it take to finally lay it down and choose your own ending? Let's talk.